I walked in a preacher's meeting at Princeton First United Methodist Church. And as I was walking in, there was a fella sitting in the back going, I knew him. He wanted me to come sit down with him, and I went and sat down with him. His name was Tommy Mounts. What a fella. He looked at me, and the very first thing he said is, I hear you're going to Lindside. And I looked at him. Nobody was supposed to know that. That wasn't supposed to be out. I said, how do you know that? He said, well, I heard. He said, I'll tell you one thing about Lindside. He said, the people down there are very, very good people. I said, how did you find out? The only one that knew that was me and my wife. And he said, and me. He said, I have my way. Still don't know how he found that out. The very next Sunday, I went to preach at Greenview, and after I preached, the people were leaving, and the chairperson of the administrative board looked at me and he said, I think you'll fit in down there. I said, fit in down where? He said, down at Lindside. And I thought, how in the world did he know that so soon? He said, I hope you'll fit in down there. And I thought to myself, I hope I fit in everywhere. But anyway, I was on my way to Lindside, and I didn't know much about Lindside. I just knew that it was farm community, beautiful fields. I knew they had a golf course down there, but I really didn't know a whole lot about Lindside. I remember one of my first sermons, and I haven't preached that sermon since, but one of my first sermons was about roosters. I just got back from Hungary helping a United Methodist church, and over there I noticed they had roosters everywhere, and they were big roosters, as big a rooster as I ever seen. And I went back to Lindside, and the first sermon I preached was about roosters. It was close to Christmas time, and I got up on Christmas morning, and my wife said, it was blue cold, she said, there's a big box out there in the front yard. I looked through the window and there was a big box out there. And she said, go out and see what's in it. I went out and walked up to that big box. It was really a big box. It had a screen on the top. And you know what was in that box? A big black rooster, as big a rooster I ever seen. It was that high. It had feet like that. And boy, did it crow. When it crowed, that whole valley shook. It was the biggest rooster I ever seen, bigger than the ones in Hungary. And I thought, what in the world am I going to do with a big black rooster? Well, what I did, I talked to a lot of farmers. And within a week, I found a farmer that would take that rooster. And he took it, and I was glad of that. It had made it a good home. And I would go back every so often to see that rooster. And I walked in there one day, and I said, well, how's the rooster doing? He said, it's doing okay. He said, it's scared all the dogs and cats out of here. And he said, this does one thing I don't like. I said, what's that? He said, it sits on the back of my horse. He had a horse, and you could look out there. I seen it. The rooster would be on the back of the horse. But anyway, after that, I tried to figure out who did that. For 5 years, I tried to figure out who brought me that rooster on Christmas morning. Never did figure it out. But what would happen, I would walk into the office, and there would be a ceramic rooster. I would go everywhere, and people would bring me roosters. I don't know how many roosters I've got. I've got plates with roosters on it. I've got cups with roosters on it. I got a clock that is a rooster. I got roosters everywhere. But they were really good people, and the whole time I was there, I was trying to figure out who did that. Never did figure it out. Never did. What I did at Lindside is I talked. I talked. I talked everywhere. I would go to the post office and I would talk to everybody that come in and out of the post office. There was a little store above the parsonage, and I'd go up there and I'd talk to everybody that came in and everybody that left. There was a chair. They had 2 chairs sitting there, and I would sit down there and I would talk to people coming in and leaving. And you know what they did? The store took the chairs out because I was spending too much time there. But it didn't stop me. I just leaned on the counter and I talked to people as they came in and as they left. There was a nice golf course down there, but there wasn't a lot of people that played golf. There were a lot of farmers, and I learned about gardens. I would stand at the garden and I'd watch people do the work, and I would talk. I learned how to stir apple butter. I watched them stir apple butter, and I would talk. They had a food distribution center. I would meet people as they came in and as they left. I would talk a lot. I would get to know the people. Another thing I did is I substitute taught while I was down there. They would call me every day to substitute. And I would go sometimes, and sometimes I had other things to do. They called me to do a long-term sub, 6 months, and I did it, 3rd graders. And you know how I taught? I would say, you do your work, do your math, work on your history, do this and do that, and if you do it and you're good, I'll tell you a story. I don't know how many stories I told a day, probably 4 or 5 stories a day. And everybody knew I was telling stories, but they were getting their work done. And you know the stories I would tell? I would tell the stories of Jesus. And small children love the stories of Jesus. Everybody in the county knew I was doing it. From the superintendent to the local teacher. Everybody knew I was doing it, and they let me do it. Not only that, after I did that first long-term substitute, they wanted me to do another, and I did. Not only that, they wanted to do the 3rd one. I said, I just can't do it again. It's just wore me out. Remember one time, I told the children, I said, we're going on a field trip. And they said, a field trip? What's a field trip? I said, we're going outside. And we went outside, 10 or 12, 15. And I said, this is what you got to do when you go outside. I said, find something that reminds you of God. Find something that reminds you of God. They went outside and I watched them. They were going everywhere looking. About a half an hour, I blew the whistle. They all lined up in a row. We went back into the room. And I said, I want you to come up here and tell me what you got. Show us what you got and how that reminds you of God. I remember this little boy brought a rock up. And I said, how's that? He said, it's strong. It's strong. Then there was a little girl come up, and she had blueberry stains all over her hand. She had some blueberries in her hand. I said, how's that remind you of God? She says, it's sweet. It's sweet. And then there was a little girl and a little boy, and she was holding his hand. I said, what are you doing? She said, Johnny reminds me of God. I said, how's that? She said, well, you know, Johnny's always in trouble. You know, Johnny's mean, and Johnny was mean. And she said, that reminds me of God because God still loves Johnny. You know, they asked Jesus, the Pharisees and the scribes, they asked Jesus and said, what's the greatest commandment? What is the greatest commandment? And Jesus said, to love God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. And the second one is just as important. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. How are we to do that? How are we to love God? To love God, I think you have to get close to God through prayer, through church. How are we to love our neighbor? We're to love our neighbor by getting close to them, by doing things with them, by going through their struggles and their pain with them. That's how we love God, and that's how we love our neighbor. Amen.